So I'm going to revisit this IP address thing, but before I'm going to show how I expose a container to the outside world. I'm going to run Nginx, the web server, and I'm going to run it in the background, so that's the -d option. And I'm also going to use the -p option with uppercase P, and that means publish all. That means take all the ports that are declared in that image and make them available. Fine. Right, where are these ports declared in the image? Is that in the Docker file or elsewhere? Generally, yes, it will be in the Docker file. And so to re-clarify with what I said earlier, in the Docker file I will have something that says, oh, this Nginx image exposes something on port 80 in the container. It doesn't say anything about what should be done about it. Which is why if I do docker run -d Nginx, and now if I do docker run -d -p Nginx, now if I do docker ps, the difference is that, so that's the first one I launched. I see in the ports column 80 TCP. So that means Docker knows that this container has something on port 80. It knows just because it's been told. It might be a lie. Maybe there is nothing listening on port 80, but the image pretends there is something. The one that I ran with -p, in the ports command I have this. I have 0000:32768 maps to port 80. That means that on port 32768 on my Docker host, I have a port mapping that connects to my container. So if I do, for instance, curl localhost, well, first if I do just that, it's going to connect to port 80. It's going to tell me connection refused. There is nothing here. Now if I do localhost on port 32768, I get the Nginx hello page. Okay. And I can even do that from my web browser here. And I get, oh yeah, on port 32768, and I get the welcome to Nginx page. So why are we mapping ports? If Docker had been a thing like maybe 15 years ago, we probably would have been able to get a whole C-class network for each machine, like a /24, 256 addresses. And so each container would have its own public IP address. But unfortunately, we are completely out of IPv4 addresses, so that's not even an option. So we have only one IP address for our EC2 instance, and we have to use it preciously. So instead, we are putting the containers on an internal private network, and we are mapping ports. Then one thing is that one of the reasons why we decided that the Docker image or the Docker file, all these things, like, they should not be able to say on which port the container should be reachable on. It's only giving information internal to the container, not external. That was something we learned the hard way, because I would say the version, not even 0, but let's say -1 or -2 at Docker, like the .cloud, the project that eventually became Docker, had this design flaw. It's like the first time you create a container, you say, hey, I want to expose port 80. If port 80 is available on the machine, it will use port 80, and that's great. If port 80 is not available, it would just pick a different port number, like 81, 82, 83, etc. And that was incredibly stupid, because then that means that when you create your service on your machine, you're like, okay, and I have this little API or web server, so I'm going to expose it. So now on my machine, port 80 is my web application or my API service. But if I get somebody else's thing, oh, it's also running on port 80, so I say, hey, expose port 80. it's going to put it on port 81. So now, for me, port 80 is my stuff and port 81 is your stuff. But for the other person, port 80 is their stuff and my stuff is going to be on a different port. So to avoid that, we decided, okay, when you expose a port, it's going to take a random high port number. Well, it's not strictly random, but it's taking like a high port number. And we are not even going to try to default to the port that's specified in the Docker file, because that would lead to accidents. So we can find out about the port that has been used with Docker PS. There is also a Docker port command, so I can see what's my container here. I can do Docker port BA162, and I want to know where port 80 was associated, and boom, it tells me the address and port that were used for that container. Now, what if I really want my stuff to be on port 80, because that's an actual web server and people are going to connect to it, so I don't want to give them a business card that says connect to this on port 32768. In that case, when you run the container, you can specify a mapping yourself. So for instance, I can do docker run -d -lowercase p. Port 80 on my machine should be connected to port 80 in the container, Nginx. And now if I go to the IP address of my EC2 instance, I get the welcome to Nginx page as well. We don't really see the difference because it's the same page, but I can have multiple port mappings, etc. And now if I try to have multiple containers on port 80, so basically if I try to run the same command again, it's going to tell me driver failed programming external connectivity on endpoint, port is already allocated. So now instead of silently remapping my container somewhere else, it's telling me, nope, that port is already taken.